Hey, good morning, dudes. Well, I'm up early and the house is really quiet, even the dog's still asleep. I can't really run any power tools and bother the neighbors just yet. So let's just take a minute and talk about fasteners for a second. These are basically drywall screws. They were designed to take a piece of sheetrock, which is like a gypsum powdery product, and attach it to a piece of wood. And so it has threads all the way through the screw because the screw was designed to sort of mash and crush its way through a piece of drywall, and then the threads would attach and connect to a wood stud for support. If you're using these for carpentry, you need to take a few things into consideration before you use them. They're very popular and everyone, gets lazy and just grabs the easiest thing off the shelf. It's not really a wood screw. This would be a wood screw. So in this case, you can see the threads don't go all the way up to the head of the screw. There's a shaft here with no threads on it. And that's by design. It wasn't that they decided not to spend the money to thread that shank out. So what the screw is designed to do is take one piece of wood and securely attach it to another piece. And you want a nice tight joint here. You don't want a loose joint or a gap or a wobbly joint. And you have to be careful with this type of screw because even if you tighten this into the wood, you can still end up with a joint that's not tight. Let me see if I can explain that. Here's a bolt. It has two nuts on it. And you can see as I rotate the two nuts, they tighten down on the shaft, but they don't get any closer together because they're both riding up and down on the threads. And if you're not careful, this is exactly what can happen if you use like a drywall type screw for your woodworking project. The screw is not only threading itself into the back piece, but it's threading itself into the top piece. And so if you're not careful, even though the head of the screw is tight on the top, these two pieces of wood are sliding up and down on that screw, so to speak, in parallel motion, and you're really not getting as tight a fitting as you should be. What generally happens is with a power drill, people will mash this in here, and they're counting on the fact that this top part of the screw is going to crush the fibers in this piece of wood, but not crush the fibers down here. And so oftentimes in trying to get these two pieces tight, you can lose grip on the bottom of the screw because it's starting to strip out. You're counting on it to strip up here, but it's not stripping down here. So when it does strip out on the bottom, then you get a very loose joint. So that's where a wood screw is designed to not have any threads at all on the top part of this shank. Well, a couple of strategies. So if this is your piece of wood on the top and this is your piece of wood on the bottom, you can drill a hole on the top for the screw, a pilot hole that is larger so that the screw threads don't bite into this piece of wood. The hole on the bottom should be basically the diameter of the shaft inside of the threads. You really don't want the screw to be a wedge and force the fibers of the wood apart. You want this screw to go in and just the threads bite into the wood and hold it securely. So the classic way of drilling out for a screw is to have a larger opening for the shank and a narrow one on the bottom so that just the threads bite into the wood. And then, of course, countersinking the top so that, in this case, a flathead screw like that would sit flush with the top of the wood and wouldn't stick out, because you can't sand the wood or do any other things with that head of the screw sticking out. That's what a countersinking bit looks like, and it makes a little pit in the wood that receives the head of the screw. So if you're tightening your work and the joint is not as tight as you anticipated and you're using this type of screw, it could be that the two pieces of wood are sliding up and down on the threads like this, and they're really not binding together. I'm going to do a whole episode on these pocket screws because it's a very cool product. But here you can see a very modern type screw, and it's engineered in a fascinating way. So here you see the shank on the top of the screw, no threads. Of course, threads on the bottom. This one's designed for like plywood. And it's got an edge cut into the tip of the screw. So this screw acts as its own drill bit, and it actually drills its own pilot hole. And the top has a nice flat bottom on it, as if there was a washer welded on that, so it gets a really good grip. This is not designed to be a flush fit. This has to be buried in a hole. And then the top has a square opening on the top for a drill bit that won't slip and strip out as easily. Very, very modern type of screw. So remember, the screw is designed to squeeze these two pieces of wood together, threads biting in the bottom piece, the head applying force this way like a clamp, and then squeezing the two pieces of wood together. Well, I bored you enough for this morning. I got to get another coffee. See you later, dudes.